Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm okay, I guess. It's
Yeah,
Wednesday.
it's Wednesday.
Yeah,
Whatever that means.
yeah.
Uh,
I have trouble remembering what day of the week it is.
that's, I guess, because you're not going to work. Is that it? Just
That's true because
all running the
yeah,
same?
right, they all run into the same thing. I have chores to do and shopping to do and workouts to do, and that's every day.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what day.
right. Well, tomorrow's class in the morning, so that kind of
Yes.
differentiates it. So, okay. Um,
Yeah, I was going to tell Rabbi Karsh about Judith.
yeah, but how could
We
you,
got sidetracked. Actually, we pretty much were talking about a similar topic as Wolf was yesterday.
which,
You
one?
you were there.
Yeah, I know, but there were topics. I mean, which,
Just, you got to love your brother, love
right.
everybody.
Yeah. Well, Rabbi Karsh has been talking about that since before October 7th, since the
Yes,
judicial, all those demonstrations and how it affected him. And, uh, you
right.
know, so yeah, I can see, I've been thinking a lot about her visit, and there's a lot going on with her, and,
Yes.
uh, well, we'll talk about it. Yeah. So, hmm. Hello, David. You,
Hello.
Hi, David.
Good morning.
he's trying to be an ogre. Okay.
It's not hard.
Oh,
Sorry.
um, hmm. Okay. Okay, Rabbi, where are you?
Show your face.
Yeah, Rabbi.
He does. Liz shows her cat's face. I show no face, and the rabbi shows his own face.
Right. And here comes Estelle.
Good morning, Estelle. It's not so much morning anymore. It's
Oh,
Hi, morning,
uh,
everybody.
good morning.
I just sent a text to Rabbi Karsh.
Just in case. He's
Yes, just in case he fell asleep in the chair.
uh, I I think he has a class. I know on Monday he has a class before our Rambam, but I'm not sure today whether he does. So,
Yeah. No, I don't think, I'm not sure, but I don't think he does.
I don't think
And
so.
I have a full
He
schedule
has
of all the classes.
he has
uh,
the class later, the one
yeah,
at
Miss Rocky.
at
Right.
Mizrahi, yes.
Benjamin, I'll hold the fort.
Where is Mr. Rabbi?
Yeah. Such a different day than yesterday was gloomy and wet and dark, and today it's
Yeah,
sunny. Yeah.
it's beautiful out, and I think it's warm and nice.
Yeah. I'm gonna go out after this. Oh, here comes somebody.
Oh, looks like Rabbi Karsh.
Hi.
Howdy. Hi.
Hi, how
Howdy.
are you?
Well,
We are good.
Good. It's good to see your avatars. Thank you,
I mean,
Liz, for the text.
okay.
I can't say whether I needed it or not. I refuse to say.
I gotcha. But you're here now. That's the important thing.
And how I'm here, that is a mystery. Oh, righty.
Rabbi
Okay.
Hirsch,
Yes, ma'am.
I was listening to a lecture that Noah Feldman, the legal scholar, was doing yesterday, because he has a book that just came out about what it means to be a Jew, something like that. And he mentioned that the only person he could think of who believes that our religion is totally based on logic is the Rambam. So
No, the Ramtal
no, he said the Rambam.
and the Ramtal.
All right, but he didn't say that. Okay. I just thought that was interesting thing to say.
Either Rambam, does the Rambam hold that even by chok? And what
Well,
does it mean
he-
to say based?
Yeah,
In other words-
he didn't go into it. It was just a passing comment, because he was talking about, the emotion that goes in, the love and emotion that is part of Judaism. And he said, as a passing thing, it's only the Rambam who would say it was all based on logic. That's all.
But what about, I mean, that needs further discussion. The Rambam himself, when he describes the mitzvahs of love, the mitzvah is to actually experience love, like love Hashem and love others. So what he would have to mean that the motivation to love is based on logic, But-
Right.
not the fulfillment of the mitzvah. The fulfillment of the mitzvah requires actual emotion, also awe. I mean, you could explain why it makes sense that there's a mitzvah and have
You
awe.
would come to it. You would come to love through logic, I suppose. Yeah. Through knowing God.
I forgot what the original, what the exact text is in Yesodei Torah. Does he say that doesn't he use the word, it's a cognitive word, that it's
Yeah, but
no,
not logic. It's not logic. It's like the mind
That's
or
true.
knowing, what you would call knowing.
yeah,
Like
but
there's a
that's not,
mitzvah
but,
no.
yeah, but that's knowing, that's one of the top three spheres. It's, it's not one of the emotional ones.
Right, but knowing, but I'm saying, let's say the mitzvah to love God. In Yesodei Torah, he says that you can arrive at love through contemplation, but he doesn't say it's through logic. He said you contemplate the creation and it brings about love, but love is certainly an emotion. And also, again, you could make a statement like that, and you could mean several things. He could mean that your motivation, even the Rambam, when he talks about rationales for mitzvahs, he acknowledges that there are many mitzvahs for which we don't know the rationale. In other words, and what I mean by that is that when he gives the rationale, he himself is speculating.
But he
We don't
believes there is a rationale. But maybe.
But if we don't know it,
Yeah, that's true.
then when we're experiencing the mitzvah, we're certainly not relying on it. You'd have to say that would be available to everybody, and also you'd have to say that, or potentially available. But then what would he do for all the people that don't have that ability? Is he saying that they're not interacting in the proper way? I don't know. He himself doesn't know the rationale for a lot of mitzvahs.
Right.
So how would he say that his intellect, he's not fulfilling the mitzvah properly? I don't know. I think there's
it's a
more
deeper
to that statement.
Yeah. I'm
He
just
is,
saying.
I
I only brought it up because we're
Right.
studying Rambam and
Right.
Rambam. Yeah.
I happen to really like listening to him, and I was once in a room with him at that Jewish studies thing that Bobby Quall and Steve Resnikoff at DePaul. They sort of organized it. And there was one time when they had just an incredible day that was devoted to professors who teach the American Constitution, constitutional law, who are Jewish, and talking about how their Jewishness, Jewish experience, impacts the way they see the Constitution and teach the Constitution. So he was one of the people there. There were like lots of very impressive people there, and he was like one of them. And I remember he remarked that although so many of the people present had said that their Jewishness and their Jewish experience had impacted the way they teach the Constitution, almost every view of the Constitution was represented by those same people. So what does it mean to say that if the end result can be so different? Which was an interesting observation. But I've listened to his podcast. Now you have to subscribe to his podcast, and I didn't go that far. But when they were available without subscription, I used to listen. He has this podcast where he always has really smart people for interviewees, and I don't know. I'm impressed by him. Also,
Well,
I think he wrote this. Either he wrote it or I heard him say it in a podcast, but I think he wrote this, that when Amy Coney Barrett was nominated to be a Supreme Court judge, he said that he mentioned that there was like a class of them who rose as professors and judges, and she was, by class, it doesn't necessarily mean they were all in the same class, literally the same Harvard class. And they may not have all been from Harvard, but he said that they were like an identifiable coterie. And whenever there was something difficult, I forgot who the other person she mentioned, she was the one you went to, because she was like head and shoulders above the rest of them as when it came to her understanding of the law. And because he identifies as liberal, but he was making the point that she is eminently qualified from a legal standpoint, which was interesting also.
Good to know.
Yeah.
We got a smart one. That talk, by the way, is just on YouTube. It's called "To Be a Jew Today" with Professor Noah Feldman. So you won't have to pay for it, and it's interesting.
Okay, very interesting. I'm not against paying for, down the road, but there's just too many things out there that if you start paying for everything.
The narrator is the Harvard Hillel, the guy from Harvard Hillel. Anyway, okay, go ahead.
I'm interested. Has he spoken out at all about Harvard and what happened at Harvard? Did he talk about it in the interview?
Listen to so many. Just go listen to it. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. All right. So now, he shetzivanu. So this is mitzvah 2:14. He shetzivanu lisyachet chasami im ishta shana tmima shelo yetze chutz leir velo yetze latzava velo yavar alav davar mehadvarim hadomim leelu ava yismach ima ad malos lo shana tmima. There is a mitzvah that a chasan, a newly married groom and bride, should spend 1 year together. That word lehityached has different meaning in different context. It seems to mean something like being one or becoming one, for that first year. So the husband should not travel. He should not go to the army. V'lo yavar alav davar me'advarim hadomim la'elu, or anything similar. In other words, they should be together for a year. Ava yismach ima ad melos lo shana tmima, but rather he should be happy with her until the completion of a full year. Vahu amru yisala, and God said, Naki beso shana achas, he shall be clean in his house 1 year. And these laws, and these laws have already been commanded and explained in the 8th chapter of Sota. I'm specifically reading the Hebrew here because the Hebrew has more richness. Again, acknowledging that this Hebrew is a translation of the original work from Arabic, but still, there's just these two key words. I'm sure there's more, but two key words, which are the word for be. The word to, here it says the room should be with his wife a full year. So the Hebrew choice was lihis yached, which the word yichud in a specific legal term means to be together with someone with an opportunity to be intimate. So we have a category of law that's called yichud, which is again built on this word, like yachad, together, that word, and those are the laws of when and how people from the opposite sex are allowed to be in a place where they could be intimate. So let's say you have an office situation and you have a male worker and a female co-worker. So there are all sorts of laws that they have to be mindful of that restrict how they can be in communication with each other. So obviously, if they're around other people, they can be in communication with each other. If they're in different rooms from each other, they can be in communication. But if they're in the same room together and there's no one else there, there's all sorts of issues related to yichud. There are ways that it could be permitted, but they have to be mindful of those rules. I remember there was a Vanity Fair piece done on Mike Pence, which sort of ridiculed the rules he has with as far as coworkers. He has rules that he will not go out with a female coworker. I think alone. I think might be in any situation. He certainly won't. He won't be at a party or something without his wife where they serve drinks. He had all sorts of rules, and they sort of ridiculed them. And the thing that was funny to me was that it was while the Me Too movement was emerging, and it was just like, you can't win. Like, let's say there's somebody who's trying to be careful that they, to put all sorts of fences in the way of ever being inappropriate with somebody from the other gender. That's being ridiculed. And then you have all these instances where people are inappropriately in contact with the people of the other gender. And there was and for those Me Too moments, there's like no suggestions how to prevent this. There's just calling people out. When somebody's trying to live with those, they get ridiculed like they're from some kind of primitive era. Anyway, so that's usually what those laws of yichud are about, that term. But here, it doesn't mean that, because that would mean they have to restrict themselves to being in like alone together in places where they could be intimate at any moment. Certainly, it doesn't mean that, but it does mean being it seems to mean being in relatively continuous contact with each other. The first year that I got married, I had a chavrusa who I still am very friendly with, and every time I'm in Israel, I meet with him, and we always have breakfast or lunch together. His name is Nassan Adler. So he was my chavrusa at the time I got married, and he was coming over to the house because I realized I shouldn't be learning outside the house, but he was coming over to the house to learn with me, like after dinner. And my mashkiach, Rav Asher Rubenstein of blessed memory, heard about it, and he told the guy he's not allowed to come over anymore, that I shouldn't be having a chavrusa. That time should be devoted to spending time with my wife. We have to get to know each other. We have to get to sort of bond with each other. And that means even, just spending time together. And that's more likely what this is about. That is just spending time together in a way that deepens and kind of cements the relationship. And this exemption from the war is actually mentioned in the Torah. That's why he's bringing it up as one of the 613 mitzvahs. This specifically comes up as an exemption from war. When the laws of war are discussed in Deuteronomy, it mentions that there are exemptions to the war, and one of those exemptions is a man who's in the first year of marriage. There are some other ones, somebody who just built a house or started working on a field. There's certain other exemptions as well for people that are fighting in the war. Those exemptions, I say this with some certainty, but not complete certainty, that there are exceptions to the exceptions. In other words, there are exceptions to the exemptions. If it is a war of self-defense, or something that we would call milchemes mitzvah, like a war where it's a mitzvah, there could be some exceptions where the groom would go. In fact, the line about milchemes mitzvah, battles that are considered a mitzvah, which would be like the battles against the 7 nations, the battle against Amalek, the battle of Midian, and battles of self-defense, those which are called milchemes mitzvah, the line is afilu kala mechupasa. Even a kala from the chuppah has to go fight in that war if necessary. I asked Rabbi First, I was at a wedding with Rabbi First, and I had a bunch of questions sort of saved up. So I asked him if this war, the war that we're fighting right now, would be categorized as a milchemes mitzvah. And he just looked at me, without hesitation and said, afilu kala mechupasa, even a kala from the bride canopy, technically would have to fight in this war. So, but then I asked him, well, then why aren't the yeshivas emptying and having all the yeshiva boys go and fight? And then he chuckled and he said, because they can't, what are they going to do right now? They don't want them. What are they going to do? Just grab a rifle and go in? But it sounded like from him that if the army had a need that these soldiers could fulfill, that they would have to do it, that these yeshiva students could fulfill, that they would have to do it. But it does seem to be up to the discretion of the army, that if they want you, then you have to serve. If they don't want you, you don't have to serve. So it's not like you just, there is some kind of a vetting that still goes on when it comes to this, even if you might be personally, it's more like you need to be personally available and ready for the possibility. But he did not hesitate at all and said afilu kal mechupasa, which would be the most extreme version of an exception to this exception. So the chassan for the first year doesn't go to war, but that's talking either not about mechemes mitzvah, or it's talking about mechemes mitzvah where they don't need him. But if they needed him, he would still have to go. And that, I guess, would also apply to some of those other exceptions. There's a famous joke where they had these people in line at the draft office in Israel, and a guy walks in and he tells them he's blind in one eye, and they say, "So is Moshe Dayan." They have him move on. Like in Israel, there aren't as many exemptions, but the yeshiva bacher exemption has been a matter of heated debate and controversy for decades. But he just sort of, it seemed quite clear from him that if they articulated a use for the yeshiva bachrim in the fighting, that the yeshiva bachrim would have to go. So that is that mitzvah. What's interesting is the Rambam holds, just looking here for a second. There's all these laws about marriage. Yeah, he doesn't mention marriage per se. There's a famous argument between the Rambam and the Rosh about whether it is a mitzvah to get married. Just marriage in general. Mitzvah. Marriage. Rambam. Yeah, so the Rambam where does he say this mitzvah? So this is an article, and it says at the beginning of the book of Noshim in his Mishnah Torah, the Rambam counts 17 mitzvahs that fall into the realm of marital law. The first mitzvah that he counts is to marry a woman with a ketubah and with kedushin. The Rambam's wording implies that this mitzvah is composed of 3 elements, etc. Before the Torah was given, a man would meet a woman in the marketplace, and if both were agreeable, he would take her to his home, consummate the marriage in private, and she would become his wife. Once the Torah was given, the nation of Israel was instructed that if a man wants to marry a woman, he must first legally betroth her in the presence of witnesses, and only thereafter become his wife. But it's just interesting because he doesn't mention it in this list. Why doesn't he mention, oh, what's mitzvah 2? Did we have it already? Maybe we had it already. I'm sorry. We might have had it already. I'm going to go back to mitzvah 2:13. We might have had it already. That's why. No, I skipped it. That's why. Somehow I skipped it. This is the mitzvah. Let's go back to this. How did that happen? I just went to the Sorry, I skipped it. Okay, here we go. That is that he commanded us to marry with kedushin, to give something into the hand of a woman through a contract or through sexual intercourse. That is the commandment of kedushin, and the hint to this is when a man take a wife and marries, indicating that he effectuates the marriage with intercourse, and his saying, and she leaves and becomes, since just like the leaving divorce is with a contract, so too is becoming marriage with a contract. And likewise, we have learned that it is effectuated with money from his saying about a Hebrew maidservant, there is no money. To this master, there is no money, but there's money to another master. And who's that? The father of the bride. But kedushin from the Torah is nevertheless explained to be with intercourse, as is explained in many places in Ketubah, Kedushin, and Nida. The regulations of this commandment are already been completely explained in Tractate Kedushin. Women are not obliged in this commandment, and in the explanation they said Kedushin with intercourse, which is from the Torah. So there's several elements here, but one is that you are doing a mitzvah when you do kedushin. When the Mishnah and the Talmud talk about marriage, there was a kind of standard etiquette when it came to formal marriage. The standard etiquette is that first there is something called kedushin, which is usually translated as betrothal. It is not engagement, the way we speak of engagement, which is just a verbal agreement between the groom and the bride, but rather it's a ceremony in which the groom hands over something of value to the bride and she accepts it, and two witnesses see it, or that they have intercourse, intimacy, and two witnesses are not watching them actually have intimacy, but they see them going into a room where they could be intimate. They just have to see them going into a room where they could be intimate. This is the yichud room that is often as part of the marriage ceremony. Even though the yichud room is typically not considered kedushin, it's usually spoken of more like chuppah, what chuppah is. But it would be something like that, what you do at the yichud room, or it could be a contract. He could sign a contract with the proper wording in it, and then hand the contract to her when she accepts the contract. Again with witnesses, that would be kedushin. So the standard etiquette was that there would be this ceremony called kedushin. And then after kedushin, they would actually be married, but they do not live together. And then there would be several months would go by, up to a year could go by. And during that time, she's and her family are gathering what they're going to contribute to the marriage. And he is sort of getting ready what he's going to contribute. Maybe he's going to build a house or find a house, and gather other basic elements that will allow him to support her properly. So there would be this period of time, and then there would be something called chuppah or nisuin, and that's that when that ceremony is done, we do it under a canopy with the Sheva brachos, we call it, the 7 blessings. We also at our weddings have a veiling of the bride, which according to somebody counts as chuppah. We have the groom and the bride sitting together at the wedding. Oftentimes they're sitting together alone at the wedding, but sitting together at the wedding. And you have the yichud room. These are all sort of connected to the notion of chuppah, but the primary way we do it is with a canopy over the two of them. the Sheva Brachos are said. At that point, they are now fully married, and with the expectation that they're going to be, that intimacy is now part of their relationship. After Kiddushin, there is not an expectation of intimacy. You could affect Kiddushin through intimacy. Let's say you were someplace where you had no access to money and you have no access to contracts. You could do, they could have a marriage where they do something like the Yichud room, and that would affect Kiddushin. But even after that intimacy, they wouldn't live together as husband and wife again until they've done chuppah. So nowadays, so that was the standard in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Nowadays, the standard is to do them both at the same time. You do Kiddushin, which is the ring ceremony, and then you have the chuppah. In order to separate those two, we have the reading of the ketubah. The reading of the ketubah is not an official act of a wedding. It's only being done to provide a break between the Kiddushin ceremony and the chuppah ceremony. In fact, humorously, my friend Mordechai Becher, at his wedding, his wife had a cousin who fancied himself a knowledgeable Jew, but he wasn't fully mitzvah observant. So, but his wife's family wanted him to have an honor at the chuppah. So Mordechai Becher wasn't sure what to do about it. So he decided that he'll ask for Moshe Shapiro, and while he's there, he's going to ask for Moshe Shapiro to read the ketubah as well at the chuppah. So he, Moshe asked him what's up, and so he told him about this, his wife's relative, might have been an uncle, and Moshe listens, and he says, "Why don't you give him reading of the ketubah, because it's not a real honor." He was about to ask Moshe to read the ketubah under the chuppah, but he quickly pivoted, and Moshe got blessings, part of the Sheva Brachos. But it was extremely funny, because nowadays we think of that as one of the great honors under the chuppah, because not a lot of people can read Aramaic, and especially Aramaic without vowels, which is how the ketubah is written. So it's just funny. It ends up becoming the honor. So the Rambam holds that it is a mitzvah to get married. In other words, a mitzvah to do Kiddushin, and a biblical commandment. This is a subject of disagreement. The one who is most generally identified as the one who disagrees with him is the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who lives in the late 1200s, early 1300s, and he's massively influential when it comes to halacha. His son his name is Rabbi Yaakov, the son of the Rosh. His son wrote the work, the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch is based on the Torah. He's hugely influential. The Shulchan Aruch says he had 3 pillars that he chiefly relied on when it came to deciding the law. This is Rabbi Yosef Karo. And those 3 pillars were the Rosh, the Rambam, and the Rif. So, he's obviously very influential. Anyways, the Rosh holds that there isn't a biblical commandment to get married. Obviously, if you get married, you've done something important. You've done what's called a hechsher mitzvah. You've been part of the preparation of a mitzvah. So it would be like building a sukkah. The mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah, or to eat in the sukkah, or to sleep in the sukkah. The mitzvah is not to build a sukkah, but you can't have a sukkah unless you put up a sukkah. So it's what we call a hechsher mitzvah. It's a kind of necessary preparation for the mitzvah. So the Rush argues that's what marriage is. The real mitzvah is pru or vu, be fruitful and multiply, which was the previous mitzvah here. That's the real mitzvah. This is a heksher mitzvah. The thing is, there's a blessing that's said under the chuppah at the time of Kedushin, that the person who is like the officiant of the wedding, he's called the Masader Kedushin, the one who organized the Kedushin, he actually says a blessing under the chuppah. That blessing, it's a sort of funny blessing. It doesn't say Asher Kitchanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu, who commanded us, but rather it's like a blessing of praise for God. The Rambam holds that even though it's an unusually worded blessing, it's like a blessing on a mitzvah. You're doing like a blessing on a mitzvah. And the Rush uses it as an example of as an indication that it's not a mitzvah because it's not written like a blessing that you would typically do before a mitzvah. So the argument between them is, are you fulfilling a mitzvah when you do Kedushin? Here, it appears that, he's saying it, the Rambam is saying that you are fulfilling a mitzvah when you get married, whereas according to the Rush, you're doing a heksher mitzvah, you're doing a preparation for the mitzvah, but the actual mitzvah is the mitzvah pru or vu. They don't argue about how it needs to be done. Everybody agrees that there has to be Kedushin and Nisuin, what we call chuppah. It's just a question of, are you actually fulfilling it? Okay, I am grateful for being able to do that. I'm sorry I skipped that, but I'm glad I caught it before too long. And I look forward to learning Rambam with you guys this coming Monday. And also looking forward to learning with most of you tomorrow on Thursday at, what time do we do it? 10 o'clock?
10
10
o'clock.
o'clock. Yeah,
10 o'clock.
thank you. Rabbi, according
Thanks,
to Rosh,
Rabbi.
would that
You're
leave
welcome,
the
Estelle.
woman? I mean, the only reason she, you have to go get one is to fulfill your mitzvah of, so you better go.
This thing about mitzvah, this is an interesting area to explore because I think everybody recognizes, and there's language in the Gemara that clearly recognizes how important it is emotionally for a woman to be married. It's an important emotional, almost a necessity. It's understood that way for a woman to be married. So they recognize that, and yet there's not a mitzvah to say. So it'd be interesting if there was a kind of list of those kinds of things where we recognize as human beings that something is so important to our well-being and our sense of fulfillment, and wouldn't be a mitzvah. I guess having a child who graduates from medical school could be in that category.
Yes.
That's a joke.
Really? Was it?
It used to be a joke.
I know. Now, if they get it from an Ivy League school,
Yeah.
fair.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.